Welcome back to another episode of the VIA podcast dedicated to exploring the American West. I'm Michelle Donati.
And I'm Mitty Hicks.
And on today's episode, we're discovering places to seek out an authentic American West experience.
I'm super excited. I know that there's been a lot of conversations about cowboy culture. Shout out to Beyonce with Cowboy Carter.
The American West is having a moment. You have the hit series Yellowstone. You have Cowboy Carter. You have the VIA podcast.
And we have Will Grant.
Born and raised outside of Denver, Colorado, Will Grant dreamed of horses since he was a child. He worked as a cowboy and a horse trainer in Colorado, Wyoming, and Texas before pivoting to a career in journalism.
I was hoping you were going to come on the show with a cowboy hat.
I was too. I was like, where's the cowboy hat?
I knew you guys were going to say that.
Next time.
We can try for that.
In 2019, he set out with 2 horses on an epic 2,000-mile journey into the Old West. In his book, The Last Ride of the Pony Express, he recounts the people he met and what he learned along the way. His writing has also appeared in Outside Magazine, Bloomberg Businessweek, and the Wall Street Journal.
Will Grant, you're a real-life cowboy. Our very first. Welcome to the VIA podcast.
Thank you. So good to be here. It's my pleasure for sure.
Oh, I hear the accent. Yes. Okay, I have to ask you this. There's this renaissance happening where people are rediscovering cowboy culture in the West. So how do you even define it?
That's a pretty tough question because this is something that's constantly evolving. The whole idea of cowboys and the image didn't even really come to be until the late 1880s. So it's not that old. And for me, it always involves horses. There's something about the horse that has really captivated me since I was a young guy, and it still does. You know, cowboy culture, at the very heart of it, includes cows. You need cows if you're going to have a cowboy, but that's moved on a little bit to a lot of other aspects of the West. Agriculture, open space, this kind of stuff.
I listened to your Outside Magazine podcast episode. In that interview, you said that you go to sleep each night thinking about horses. So is that where your cowboy dream started?
I think so. And that's true. It helps me to fall asleep if I think about a horse running through a field of sunflowers. But it started early for me. I just have never wanted to do anything else.
And how did you go from that interest as a child to getting this idea for your book, The Last Ride of the Pony Express?
So I thought I needed to write a book. And the Pony Express emerged as an avenue for me to talk about the West in a lot of different ways. And my book is really about the people I met and the landscapes that I passed through and the context into which all that fits.
You did this with 2 horses, Chicken Fry and Badger. So in your world, do you call it a road trip or is it something else?
I tell people that I was on the road for 5 months. That's how long it took me, 142 days. But I don't really call it a road trip. I call it a horseback journey because the horses, it was like the biggest babysitting job of my entire life, looking after these horses. My goodness.
Well, looking at the cover of this book, it is so cool. It is everything I think going on a horseback riding adventure would look like. Talk to us a little bit about that cover.
That photograph was taken almost in the exact center of Nevada. And Badger is the horse I'm riding, and he's a bay horse. So he's a brown horse with a black mane and tail. And Chicken Fry.
I love that name. It's great. It's great.
Oh, Chicken Fry.
So he came with that name, and I just couldn't change it. That's like the best name for a horse I've ever heard.
Do you still have the horses?
100% I do. Those horses are not for sale. These are like my soulmates.
Oh. So you went on this journey, 2,000 miles, 142 days. What was the single most important thing you learned about the West on this ride?
There's a great diversity of people and experiences out there. You know, you can look at the map and it doesn't necessarily look so different, say Nebraska to Wyoming to Utah. But I found such a variety of experiences, families, and land stewardship. And so I really came away with an appreciation for the spectrum of people in the West, traveling slowly by horseback, 3 miles an hour. You really have a lot of time to look around and see the details of the landscape and to think about what you're seeing and who you just met and how this all fits into the greater image of the American West.
Can you talk to us about your favorite encounter with another person?
Sure. In central Nevada, like 3 days after the cover photograph was taken, I camped at a ranch called the Dry Creek Ranch. And there was a guy there who was probably 50 years old, a bachelor, and he seemed like a real relic of the Old West. He was like the last man standing from the Pony Express. The way he talked, the way he looked. He owned 30 horses, a bunch of cattle.
Wow.
Yeah, he lived in a very historic place. His barns and his house were very old and made by hand. I really enjoyed his company, and everything about this guy and where he lived really struck me as being a continuum between the Old West and the New West.
Oh, that's amazing. So now that you've completed this ride, where do you want to start on our adventure today, exploring and having an authentic West experience?
So I'll tell you, right west of Salt Lake City, Utah, there's an area called the West Desert. And this is a cool place. It's remote. There is a massive herd of wild horses there. And when I rode in there, I was actually threatened by a stallion who tried to steal my horses, Chicken Fry and Badger. And this was...
Oh, no.
Yeah, very scary for me. The stallion came running at us, and it ran circles around us, and I ended up throwing rocks at it to scare it off.
You're one person with 2 horses.
Oh, yeah.
But you're also up against this herd of, is it wild Mustangs?
That's it, wild Mustangs.
Okay.
In a herd of wild horses, the young males are pushed to the periphery, so they don't breed with the mares. The older stallions chase them off, and these young males are what I was dealing with. He was investigating my horses.
Wow.
And Chicken Fry and Badger, by the way, were totally unfazed by the situation. I don't even know if they knew it was a wild horse.
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of my introduction into the West Desert of Utah. It was a very cool place. I was about 5 days crossing this desert. It's about an hour and a half drive west of Salt Lake City.
Okay.
And so you want to make sure you have a full tank of fuel in the car, full tank of gas, and plenty of water. I think anybody who is interested in seeing Mustangs, wild horses, should drive out there because it's so interesting to see their familial interactions and the social hierarchy of the horses. They're every color of the spectrum, and it's really a unique aspect of the American West. And there's no better place to see as many horses as in the West Desert.
Your situation was really scary. Do you have any tips on how to visit safely?
Aside from don't ride your own horses there?
Yeah. So don't take horses out there. There's no reason. Go out there with a camera.
Okay.
Yeah, take a camera, but don't take a horse. Yeah.
There you go.
So the horses are no danger to people at all. You should not get close to the horses. Wherever there's wild horses, you have to be very careful. A lot of wild horses in the West just run away when you see them.
What is it like to see them in their natural habitat?
I'll tell you the impression that I was left with was the sound. 250 wild horses galloping. They talk about like the thunder roll of hoofbeats. This is the place to hear it. And I'll tell you, when you hear those horses go running over the prairie, it's a really interesting sensation. The landscape looks like the surface of the moon in places. When I was camped out there at night, it's so quiet that I could hear insects crawling in the grass around me.
Oh, boy. So we're talking about the West Desert of Utah, and it sounds like the area of Simpson Springs.
That's it.
There is good camping there. It sounds like there's also still several Pony Express stations there. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the Pony Express Trail went right through there. And Simpson Springs is a very good place to camp. There are established campsites, and you're not going to see any brighter stars than you will out there. And they reconstructed a Pony Express station there. The Pony Express was a mail service in 1860 with horses.
Mm-hmm.
And so this gives you a sense of what these people went through living in this very remote place. You can see ruins of stations, and it really makes you appreciate the amenities and comforts of life today. No question about that.
Okay.
And you can also see the original trail of the Pony Express. It never rains, it just very little. So there's no erosion. So anything out there really sticks around for a long time. So they put a dirt road out there, and then 20 feet to the right of it is the Pony Express trail. And I mean, on the old trail, I found horseshoes and mule shoes and bits of iron left over. So it's a place where the history is very tangible. To be out there and breathe the air and see the horizons, it's quite a lesson.
So just for clarification, when you say trail, if we're driving out there, you can walk the Pony Express trail.
Correct. It's like a faint trace. It's a pretty easy place to hike around, to explore. It's a daunting landscape to cross with horses, but it'd be a great place to visit for the day.
And another point of interest in the area is the Bonneville Salt Flats, which is very high on my list of places to experience.
It is worth seeing those salt flats for sure. You know, effectively, you could do a loop from Salt Lake City and drive along the Pony Express Trail for most of the day, and then loop north through the salt flats and see the sunset, perhaps, while you're on one of those salt flats. This area is all called the Great Basin. That's what the Great Salt Lake is. It's the last of a huge lake that was there. And the salt flats are the bottom of the lake where all the salt that was in the water evaporated. And so it's as white as snow, and it's as flat as a billiard table. It is a lunar landscape for sure.
So it sounds like the sunset is the best time to witness these flats.
Absolutely.
I read that it is so flat that you can actually see the curvature of the earth. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, wow.
You can look at a satellite image of this area and you can see, looks like someone spilled milk over the landscape. And it's long. And so you can certainly see the curvature of the earth.
That's great.
It's a unique environment. That is for sure.
So we're heading out of Utah. Where are we heading next?
One of the things about the West is that the environment, the landscape, has had a direct effect on the people in steering culture in certain ways. We're heading to northern Arizona, to the Diné land, which is the Navajo reservation. And there's a place there called Canyon de Chelly. It's right near the small town of Chinle, Arizona, and it's about 3.5 hours northwest of Albuquerque. It's in the Four Corners region, and a lot of people know this from like the slick rock formations around like Moab, Utah. You may have seen like these big red rock formations.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going on in Canyon de Chelly. But Canyon de Chelly is the longest inhabited place on the Colorado Plateau.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful sandstone canyon with sheer walls, vertical walls, and a flat base to it. And the history of the people in the land comes together in this place that is unlike really any other in the West.
I love that this destination made it on your list. My grandmother actually grew up in this area, and so I have so many stories that she shared with me over the years. Can you tell us about how rich this destination is when it comes to Indigenous history?
The canyon is the birthplace of their identity and what the ruins mean and what they found there. All kinds of stuff in the Colorado Plateau, like that comes from South America. They find shells from the ocean, and they find a macaw skull in these places.
Wow.
And so it speaks to the trade routes that were ancient trade routes covering what appears to be a really inhospitable landscape out there. Somehow, these people have eked out livelihoods, and it's been going on longer in Canyon de Chelly than anywhere else. And you can feel it when you're there. It's a very spiritual place. And to do anything on tribal land, you need either a permit or a member of the nation to guide you. And if I was going to take a trip to this area and didn't know, I would hire a guide to tell me about all of it.
And how do you go about hiring a Diné guide?
The way I would do it is there's a great motel, the Thunderbird Lodge, and they are ready to cater to people who want to appreciate their natural wonders and their cultural sites. And so I would go to the front desk and I would say, give me the best guide you got, and I just want the full measure. Tell me everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they do offer vehicle tours, which is in like a Jeep, or you can hike it, or you can ride a horse. And it just depends. If you want to ride a horse and see these places, they'll certainly put you on a good horse, and they'll have a guide. It's a little bit different. I would recommend probably in a vehicle, because you can drive up and down the canyon, your guide will, and he'll be able to point out the ruins there because there's like cliff dwellings. And then also you might get invited in for tea to someone's house. And this would be what you want, is to, like a look at the culture as it exists now. How do these people live? They're all going to be pretty accustomed to visitors.
Okay.
This is a widely visited spot. So you don't need to worry about any of that.
So tea's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
So having tea in someone's house is okay.
Yeah. They would be more than happy to let you in. But if you're riding horses, no one's going to invite you in, because what are you going to do with the horses? So I would recommend taking a vehicle tour and getting, say that you want everything. Talk about the vegetation, the natural history, some of the geology, as well as the cultural history. And for me, this is what makes traveling so fun, is when you meet the people who really bring the landscape to life.
I'm so glad that you've covered that for us, especially in relation to this destination. In almost every episode of the Via podcast, all of our guests at some point have said, work with the local experts. And so this is just another reminder and confirmation that local experts really do hold the key to authentic travel experiences. And it sounds like a Diné guide holds that for visiting the Navajo Nation in Canyon de Chelly.
100%.
Can you tell us about some other points of interest in the area?
Yeah. Two things that the Diné people are really known for are weaving rugs and their jewelry, their silversmithing. And so visiting the trading posts is a cool and very unique experience. And on the way, if you flew into Albuquerque and drove to Chinle, you would pass a place called Hubbell's Trading Post. And Hubbell was one of the first to set up a trading post out there. And it still is functioning and in service. And that would be an excellent place to stop and to talk to the weavers. The jewelry is unique and cool, but really the rugs are a real source of identity for a lot of these Diné communities.
Do we know if they're using material from the land at all?
Oh, yeah, we do.
To create these?
That's a Roger. They certainly are. So the Spanish brought sheep to this area in the 1600s. And it turns out there's not enough grass in a lot of this area for horses or cattle, but sheep do very well. And it turns out that both the landscape and the Diné people get along with sheep very well. And so they've developed a relationship with the sheep that the end product of that are these rugs. And certainly a lot of the rugs are dyed locally and woven with local wool. And they'll show you their sheep. It's a special breed of sheep called churro sheep. That's the Diné sheep. And they use it for meat and wool. And they're hardy little critters for sure. And so like an hour and a half north of Chinle is a place called Tisnas Pass.
Okay.
And there's a trading post there. There's a lot of innovation in the artistic style by young people. They're doing all kinds of things with colors and patterns and geometry. The geometry of the rugs is astounding. And if you go to these trading posts, there's one at Totalina, Tisnas Pas, Hubble. They're scattered throughout the tribal lands. It's a deeply cultural experience to be out there. And it is certainly part of the American West.
This area holds a special place in my heart because it's where my grandmother grew up in this region. She actually grew up on a trading post in the Navajo Nation. And that trading post no longer stands today, but I spent my entire childhood and up until she passed away last year learning about the mythology and tradition and the beauty of this land. And so I just really appreciate you sharing this. And it is very special and certainly a place to experience the West very authentically.
Very authentically. And like I've said, for me, the real value in travel is not just a landscape. I do appreciate that. I studied geology, but really the humanity. Your grandmother is absolutely correct. It's very cool, your history with it. I'm glad to hear this.
All right, we are leaving Arizona and we're heading north?
Yeah, Sheridan, Wyoming.
Wyoming is another state that is massive. And Sheridan is this cool little town in this massive state. So tell us about that.
Cow town, right?
Sheridan is definitely a cow town. You're not going to find any better example of a Western cow town than Sheridan. Not with good hotels, at least. There's obviously cow towns all around Wyoming where you can't even buy a bag of peanuts out there. But Sheridan is cool. It's probably an hour south of the Montana line. It's northern Wyoming.
Okay.
And there are a lot of cows out there, and there are a lot of cowboys out there. It's in a beautiful example of the rolling prairies, the rolling grasslands of interior North America. That's right where Sheridan is. There's big ranches up there. It's got a long history of ranching and agriculture in the area, and some history that's not so typical of the West because it's entertained British royalty on like 3 occasions.
That sounds so random.
So random. But the reason is because it's like a good example of the cowboy culture of the American West.
There's a saloon downtown, right? There has to be.
Oh, yeah. There's a saloon downtown, and it'll be full of guys wearing cowboy hats. There'll be the sound of boot heels on the floor, and definitely Sheridan can get wild on Friday and Saturday nights. It's a good kind of wild. Bring the cowboys in off the ranches and let them spend some money. That's what happens on Saturday night.
Well, I'm curious because the first 2 places that we were talking about, I just really picture these beautiful just mountains and things in the backdrop. Does Wyoming offer that as well?
It absolutely does.
Incredible views.
You're right there on the edge of the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountains. So just to the west of town, you're in the Bighorn Mountains. There'll be snow-capped peaks. There's moose up there. It's wild country for sure.
Oh, moose.
Anywhere outside of Sheridan, you can't go wrong. One thing about Wyoming is that it's the least densely populated state in the lower 48.
Oh, I didn't know that. Aside from the downtown area, there's a lot of history.
Yeah, there is a lot of history there, and it goes back pretty far. The Native Americans and the U.S. Army fought Custer's last stand. We've all heard of that. General George Armstrong Custer and the 7th Cavalry met their demise. They're an hour north of Sheridan, and there's a monument there. And it's worth seeing. It brings into perspective the conflict between the expansion of the United States in the 19th century and the existing Native American tribes, which is a very ugly part of the history, certainly worth thinking about and learning about. And it's a historic place there. There's Native American cultural sites in the Bighorn Mountains there that are particularly interesting, like these large rings of rocks, which they're not sure the spiritual role of these formations. but there's something going on. You can see that pretty quickly that there was somebody.
Can you feel it? Can you feel something?
The mountains are like majestic. You can see from the top of the Bighorns, you can see a long way. It's like an awe-inspiring place to me. If Canyon de Chelly is deeply spiritual, the top of the Bighorn Mountains are more like a grandeur, like an awe-inspiring landscape that makes you feel very small. The Bighorn Mountains are beautiful and fairly untrammeled area. Wyoming doesn't get a lot of tourism outside of Jackson.
Oh, that's true.
Jackson Hole is the big destination. And that's one thing that makes the Sheridan area so nice, is that it's quieter. It's a sizable town. I think it has 18,000 people, but it's quiet.
Until the rodeo comes to town.
And then
that's right.
When the rodeo comes to town, look out.
Big city vibes.
So the rodeo is in July every year, right after the 4th of July. And the Sheridan rodeo is like the cowboy culture come to life. It's always like wild and woolly, as we say. They have, an ambulance on site. They say the only good reason to ride a bull is to meet a nurse.
Okay.
But one unique aspect of the Sheridan rodeo is that they have the Indian relay races. And this is the championship. So like Lakota and all of these northern plains tribes compete in this. And it is certainly wild. It's one rider. And they have 3 horses, and there's no saddle on the horse. And the horse runs around the arena. The rider gets off that horse, gets on another horse, and does the same thing. So he makes 3 laps around the arena at breakneck speed. These guys are running these horses for all they're worth. And so they run this horse around the track, and then they like plow into the other 2 horses, jump on the new horse, and take off around the track. And it is like fast and furious. It's 5 different teams. It is super Western, super entertaining, very colorful, very lively. It's beautiful weather up there during that time of year. They'll have good livestock and all the best cowboys will be there. It's a week-long party, essentially. And the bars will be full of cowboy hats every night. It's certainly worth seeing, and it's such a family-friendly environment.
I'm so glad that you shared that with us. That rodeo is such a big part of Wyoming and cowboy culture. One of the things that's at the very top of my list for a West experience is a dude ranch.
We should just set you up a dude ranch vacation right now.
Let's go. Let's do it.
What is a dude ranch? Can you both define? Michelle has been talking about dude ranches. I'm just going to have to ask, what is a dude ranch?
A dude ranch is a guest ranch. And the way this all started is that really in the 1920s, ranching was having a hard time. And the ranches, these big outfits, they controlled a lot of land, were looking for a way to supplement their income. And so they said, let's take people who are interested in this culture and this environment and bring them out here and put them up for a week. And we can show them what it is we do. And dude comes from someone who was not from a ranch. So a dude is slang, like someone from the East,
I'm a dude.
I didn't know that.
That's where it comes from. And so they say if you have a really gentle horse and you're in the horse business, you can say, well, he's a dude horse. Meaning like you could put, your cousin from back East on this horse and they're not going to die.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can you expect when you go on a dude ranch vacation?
Horseback riding is definitely a part of every dude ranch. If they don't have horses, it's not a dude ranch. But there's other activities. There's fly fishing, hiking. Some of them offer mountain biking. Many of them include a spa.
Mitty, now you know why I'm all about that dude ranch life.
Yeah, okay. So, Will, she does not like to camp. But I don't know how I feel about this because we're talking about authentic West. And I feel like real cowboys don't go to spas.
You got that right. I'll tell you what, the last place in the world you're going to find me is in a spa. This is not the cowboy way.
And that's why a dude ranch works, because you can cowboy up all day, or you can spa, and you can have a little bit of something for everyone.
That's exactly right.
And I understand that Wyoming is home to some of the oldest dude ranches in the West.
Wyoming was really a pioneer in this industry. Two of the best dude ranches in Wyoming. One is east of Sheridan called Eaton's Ranch, and one is in southern Wyoming called the A-Bar-A. And they both offer a really intimate look at where the cowboy comes from. If you spend a week at the A-Bar-A Ranch in Encampment, Wyoming, you will certainly come away with an idea of what it means to live on these places.
So with Eaton's Ranch, it's a big part of history. It's one of the it's the oldest in the country, right?
Correct. It's a relic of the West in many ways.
One of the reasons why a dude ranch getaway appeals to me is because they appear to be so family friendly. And I have 3 boys, and I want them to know more about the West and how it came to be.
Absolutely. It can be almost like summer camp for these kids. These places will offer cattle drives. They're like, you want to be a cowboy? They'll be like, all right, have a good breakfast, and we'll see you at the corrals down at the barn at like 8:00. And they'll take you out there and you can see how this works.
This doesn't sound exciting, Will.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Because we're dudes.
We are dudes.
Yeah, you're dudes. It's okay. It's fine. It's an interesting form of animal stewardship. Like the horses and the cattle really get along, pretty symbiotic. It feels very organic and it's very meditative. And the rhythm of the horse walking and the sound of the cattle, that is what the cowboy myth is all about. And frankly, if the kids aren't interested, then you just take them down to the corral and they'll watch a few of these guys trotting around on their horses and they'll be like, that's what I want to be. Because who wouldn't want to be a cowboy?
Right.
It's dangerous. It's exciting. It's physically active. You sleep well at night. Best job in the world.
You shared with us today places where the Old West is alive and well and has evolved. I'd love to know from your perspective, why do you think that the myth of the American West has such a stronghold on us? Why is it? What do you attribute to its resurgence in current spotlight in pop culture?
You know, the current embracing of this cowboy culture it's not a mystery to me because I feel the same way, and I'm certainly glad to see it. But I don't know, I think that there's a lot of romanticism tied up in it. And I think that's okay. I mean, you have to be reasonable about everything, the historical record and what's gone on in the past 200 years. It allows you to draw perspective. And so for like Sheridan, Wyoming, Canyon de Chelly in the West Desert of Utah, the next time you look at a map of the American West, it won't look the same to you. Then you have like context through which a better understanding could be achieved. A sense of place comes through it, and that can mean a lot of different things. But if you visit these places, you certainly won't think of Utah, Wyoming, or Arizona the same. I would say that.
Well, do cowboys get the fuzzy feeling? Because that just gave me chills.
Of course they do. Yeah, every time I see someone doing something cool on a horse, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'll say one thing about the romance of the cowboy myth and everything, but I've never had another line of work where the other people I was working with, guys on the crew, philosophize and romanticize the days of old so heavily. If you build a house, if you get a job building a house, you never hear the carpenter say like, oh man, I wish we were doing this with like hand tools.
Yeah.
I wish there was no power saws.
That is so true.
Yeah,
but we're still in the good old days with cowboy culture.
We sure are. That's right. And that's what I learned on the Pony Express Trail, that nothing has ended, that it's simply a continuum, and that there's a constant evolution here. And to be part of it is cool in the 21st century. It's certainly like an American identity. And it's fun to have a modern perspective that is so entrenched in a romantic past. When they talk about riding off into the sunset, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about these idyllic days where the animals are happy, the sky is clear, and there's no better view in the world than looking between the ears of a horse.
I'm sold.
Will Grant, you are a cowboy philosopher. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
No, this is my pleasure.
Well, I promise by next year, I'm going to be less of a dude. I am going to impress you. You just wait.
No, thank you. This was very fun. I appreciate it.
We heard some great tips from Will, but now it's time to hear from AAA members.
They always have great stories to share.
First up, we have AAA member Donna Jacobo from Arizona. She says that Tanque Verde Ranch in Tucson, Arizona is a must try. I went there on a management retreat and I loved it. We went horseback riding, hiking, and played tennis. I also recommend visiting Arizona's Vulture Gold Mine.
I love the hiking part and also playing tennis because I think it shows just how versatile these ranches can be.
Yeah, and Tanque Verde Ranch is one of the ranches on my list that I absolutely want to visit. So excited to check that one out. We also heard from AAA member Pamela Sheldon in Nevada. Pamela writes, "We've gone to Honeywell Ranch in Bridgeport, California for the past 10 years, and now our daughter and 2 granddaughters join us too. The ranch has a long history and is run by the original family. Besides the actual ranch work of rounding up and moving cattle, we love trailering the horses up into the mountains and spending the day riding through the beautiful landscape and then stopping for a picnic lunch. The amazing week also includes a morning ride to a barbecue, hayride, talent show, and a game night. And last but not least, the food is delicious and the cabins are clean and comfortable."
Michelle, all I heard was barbecue, horseback riding, fall, leaves, sign me up right now.
And cabins. We're not camping, we're cabining.
Right up your alley.
Love your comments, questions, and especially your stories about travel in the West. Send us an email at viamail@viamagazine.com. Again, that email is viamail@viamagazine.com. You can also leave us a voicemail at 415-475-9350. Again, that phone number is 415-475-9350.
And don't be shy. You may hear your voicemail played on the podcast.
The VIA podcast is hosted by Mitty Hicks and Michelle Donati. That's me.
Produced by Whitney Fanoof, editor-in-chief of VIA, Katie Henry, managing editor of VIA, and editorial consultant April Kilcrease, alongside Dave Beasing and Jason Jackson of Sound That Brands.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the VIA podcast. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Discover more places to travel in the West at AAA.com/VIA. VIA Magazine is published by AAA Mountain West Group.
The views and opinions expressed by podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of AAA Mountain West Group or its personnel.